I would like to call to order the special and regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District for Monday, March 20th. Today, we are going to start our meeting with a closed session, and I would like to have a roll call by the clerk.
Mayor Oglesby,
I believe Mayor Oglesby is going to arrive in just a few minutes.
Director Paul,
Here, virtually.
I believe Director,
Director Eisenhart, absent. Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams.
here.
We have a quorum of the board.
Thank you very much, Joelle. Are there any additions or corrections on the closed session agenda today?
There are none.
Going on.
Is this public comment?
What's happening?
Lost audio.
Decision in regards to the case. I have read and reviewed the case. It seems to be very concise, well thought out. And having been in a situation where we have made appeals and other efforts that I've belonged to, it's difficult to turn over a judge's decision. I'm sure anything can be rationalized or so, but looking at the points of the case that she has outlined, I would hope that this body take into serious consideration no further waste of ratepayers' money or so, unless you are 100% positive that this could move forward and that you could win a decision. Again, it's very well thought out, goes point by point, very concise, and I think that you ought to consider yourselves lucky that you didn't really have to pay any of that money back. So those are my comments. I'm glad we're back in public again, and I look forward to participating more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cheshire.
Hello, thank you. My name's John Tilley, citizen. And I'm speaking in reference to the Measure J closed session item that you will be considering. And I'd like.
Bye, have a good night.
No, I'm good.
Thank you. This background. Yeah. I'll go ahead.
All right, have a good night.
So what I'd like to do is think back to when Measure J was introduced to the public and the public outreach that occurred and what the public was told at that time to expect from Measure J. And I would invite people in the public who aren't aware of it to go to YouTube.
Yeah.
Some of the presentations. And that was at the Middlebury Institute.
Excuse me, John.
Thank you.
If you are not speaking, could you please mute yourselves? Thank you.
As I was saying, there was one presentation that was at MIS. I attended that one, the Middlebury Institute. There was another one at the Unitarian Church. And what the public was told at that time, you'll see on these, is that this was going to be done at no cost to the public. This was simply a feasibility study that would not have an expense to the public. Later on, that became different. We were told as public that those funds were in reserve. And I believe the public was told that we were doing a feasibility study. Since then, it has escalated quite a lot. And I think it's really time to put a halt to the pursuit of Measure J. The water supply charge is gone as far as I'm concerned. That's $3.4 million roughly from your budget. That's gone. That's a considerable risk. This building has to be refinanced in coming weeks. That's a considerable risk. But it's far outweighed by the risk of Measure J. The budget is under stress and funds are needed for true capital projects. But the real risk of Measure J can be found if the public goes online and Googles Apple Valley versus Liberty Utilities. In May of 2021, Apple Valley suffered a defeat in the courts that looks extremely similar to what we're facing here. I think if you read through that court case, it's not that hard to substitute certain names for certain entities and find that we're on a very precipitous path. There was a financial outcome where the district, well, the city wasn't a district at that point. The city, in that instance, the city had to go out and take a mortgage against basically their sports center downtown, a great asset that had no debt against it, in order to satisfy the cost of the settlement. If you are going to come out of closed session still pursuing Measure J, please disclose to the public the full financial risk that are part of this, the tens of millions of dollars that are at risk by this district if it loses that suit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley.
Good afternoon. Tom Raleigh, Vice President of Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. I'd like to just read, I assume that you've seen a copy of this, of the 16-page decision by Judge Carrie Panetta, and it's very clear. On the basis that the continued collection of the water supply charge after the user fee was reinstated and collected on the CalAm bills, which started in April 2016, we're now in 2023, violated the ordinances, and that's ordinance 152, sunset provision. The district is ordered to cease the imposition and collection of the water supply charge by the amount of the user fee. The details are up to you guys, but it's up to this board to direct your staff to take action to carry out what Judge Panetta has ordered. It's a writ of mandate. You can appeal it, but you're delaying the inevitable. I suggest you make a hard decision and tell the staff to proceed to desist collecting the water supply charge on our property tax bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. Is there any member, any other person in the chambers or in the room that wish to speak now? And because we are a hybrid meeting, I will turn to our Joelle Pablo and see if you can let me know if there's anyone online who wishes to make comment today.
Good evening. So if you wish to make public comment for this evening's closed session meeting, please raise your hand. Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. With seeing no more comments, I will now just take ourselves out of public comment, and we will recess into closed session. So we will return to the regular session of the board at 6 o'clock when we'll call to order the meeting. So thank you very much. We are now going into closed session.
Chair Adams, I don't know if you want Dave Laredo to read out the matters that are listed on today's closed session agenda.
Thank you very much for reminding me of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have two items in closed session: conference with real property negotiators concerning properties held by California American Water Company. And CS2 is existing litigation, the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association versus Monterey Peninsula Water Management District case, Superior Court case number 21 CV 003066.
Thank you. So now we will recess into closed session. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to call to order the special and regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District for Monday, March 20th. And we are going now into regular session. I would like to have a roll call, please.
Thank you. Mayor Oglesby. Here. Director Paul.
Here.
Director Eisenhart, and he will not be joining us today. Director Riley. Here. Director Edwards.
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson. Chair Adams.
Here.
We have a quorum on the board.
Thank you very much. Now, if you would please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you. Are there any additions and corrections to the agenda?
Yes, we have one addition to the agenda. Due to the need for immediate consideration by the board for matters that arose after the posting of the published agenda and as provided by Government Code Sections 54954.2 of the California Government Code, the board is being asked to make the following addition pursuant to Assembly Bill 2449 and to allow Director Paul to participate remotely. This is going to be an emergency cause due to a medical emergency, I believe, Director Paul. And that's the addition that I have for tonight's agenda. And we will need, I believe, a majority of the board to.
Yeah. Hang
approve this
on,
addition.
there's one other addition. It is an action item. Call it item 14B. And this would be to authorize expenditure of up to $60,000 for an update to the rate study for Measure J by the Reftelis Financial Consulting team.
You, General Manager Stolt. Okay, shall we move forward then?
Madam Chair, you do need a motion and a second to add those two items.
Excellent, so very much. Could I have a motion then? Thank you very much. Is there a
I'll second. Go ahead there, Mayor.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Riley.
Aye.
Director Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart, Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to go into oral communications, and anyone wishing to address the board on the consent calendar, information items, the closed session items, or matters not listed on the agenda may do so only during the oral communication section. So if you could please limit your comments to, we've got a lot on the plate tonight. I'm going to say 2 minutes and wondering if I'm going to get shot for doing that. But they've not done it to me yet at the Board of Supervisors.
Good evening
so I'm gonna
again.
Give it a shot.
Tom Raleigh, it's going to take me about 10 seconds.
There you go.
Thank you for meeting live so we can all eyeball you, eyeball to eyeball. And so you know what we look like. Calling in is virtually, quite frankly, it sucks. And so this is a much better way to run a meeting, a government meeting that is considering the important issues you're discussing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment?
Hello, good evening. Evan Jacobs, California American Water. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about Measure J. I think it's disappointing that this district is still considering moving forward with the use of eminent domain to condemn our water system. We know that voters in the past on the Monterey Peninsula have decisively rejected initiatives in the past to condemn our water system. But in 2018, Measure J was posited as a feasibility study, simply to look at the feasibility. Since then, you all have spent more than $2.5 million on attorneys and consultants. It sounds like we're going to add 60,000 to that tonight. We don't often hear the word feasibility used anymore in regards to Measure J and the condemnation of our water system. That's unfortunate. I think that when the feasibility study was completed in 2019, the circumstances were different. And I think it's worth looking if it is still feasible and if it's really the right thing for this district to do. We have been telling you for 5 years, and I know back in 2005, we had the same message that a condemnation attempt would be costly and lengthy, and that ultimately it was likely to fail. We know that the last 2 condemnation attempts in California have resulted in poor outcomes for the condemning agencies. The city of Claremont lost more than $10 million in its fight to condemn the water system there. And in Apple Valley Ranchos, there's more than $20 million in outstanding legal fees that the city is liable for. So I would ask you, how much money are you willing to wager on this attempt? Are there better uses for that money? I certainly believe there are. There are talented people on this board and on this staff. I believe our efforts are better spent developing new water supplies to protect the Carmel River and to support the much needed new housing. We've got work to do and condemnation is going to be another distraction from it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to make comment this evening? And Joelle, could you tell me if there's anyone online who wishes to make comment?
Yes, we have 4 raised hands. And at this time, I would like to invite John McPherson. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you very much. This is John McPherson, Executive Director of Sustainable Ag and Energy in Monterey County. Based on the closed session agenda items, it does appear that the agency is moving very quickly from evaluating the feasibility of acquiring CalAm's assets to planning a takeover of a private company that we just heard from doesn't intend to be bought. This sounds like another great Monterey County legal water war. And I think it's incumbent upon the agency to explain to the ratepayers as to why this is in their interest going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson.
Next up, we have Melody Crislock. Melody, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Melody Crislock, Public Water Now. Certainly, oh, there's a real echo here. Certainly, there's no better use. The money that you are contemplating spending on acquiring CalAm. If the last 3 years have not proved to some of the folks that think that this is not a good idea, they haven't been following what's going on. I mean, we've just experienced, and we're not done yet, CalAm refusing a cheaper, more environmentally friendly water project so that it can starve the community of water and get its expensive, overpriced desal project, which will produce more water than we could ever use in hundreds of years. And yet people are still championing CalAm. I mean, no one out there seems to understand that no one is controlling CalAm. This is what happened at the CPUC. They put the CPUC in a terrible position. First of all, they asked for $81 million for wells and pipes for a project that's only going to cost $70 million with a public agency to build it. And then when they didn't get that, they got 75% of that, $61 million, and they still refused to sign the water purchase agreement to allow our new water supply to move forward. Now, finally, the Office of Ratepayers Advocates has negotiated with them so that they'll get another 10 million, making it $71 million for 4 wells and some pipeline in order to sign this water purchase agreement. Is there anyone, this is completely ridiculous. It should never happen this way, and no one can control CalAm. There's a fault in the system here. So yes, we need to buy out CalAm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crislock.
Next up, we have Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready.
Thank you and good evening, Chair and Board. I just want to respond to some of the comments being made that the district should not make an offer to CalAm to buy them out. It's not about the board asking them to be bought out. This is following Measure J. It's the ratepayers and voters of this area that have asked to have CalAm bought out because we want a public water agency. There's nothing here that should be even questioned. CalAm is a very just disrespectful and dishonest company. They have a bloated desal project that they pushed through. They promised the Coastal Commission they would sign that water purchase agreement. Then they turned around and danced away from it because they want more money, more and more money. They keep raising our rates continuously. They have managed to sabotage as much as they can progress on a very wonderful project for water, our recycled water project, Pure Water Monterey, and expanding it. They have no honor in my book. And so that's why the ratepayers of this district have voted to have this company bought out. So I say I support that 100% as long as it's feasible and it's doable. I have much respect for the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, and they can do this job just as well and better. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Schiavone.
Next up, we have Tammy Jennings. Tammy, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, Tammy Jennings, Monterey, ratepayer for CalAm. I'm getting echo too. Anyway, I agree with what Susan said and Melody said. CalAm, first of all, the voters and the ratepayers voted for this years ago. If you did another vote today, I guarantee you that probably 100% of the, not 100%, maybe at least 80% of the population would vote for it, for a buyout, because of what CalAm has done the last 5 years. They are unscrupulous, money-grubbing conglomerate that doesn't have the Monterey Peninsula's best interests at heart. They want money for their stockholders, and they don't really care about us as a entity wanting to have the best water, the cheapest water, and the most dependable water source. And we have that in the expansion, which thank God is going to go through now. No thanks to CalAm. Please, please continue with your wonderful work that you're doing and continue to buy out CalAm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings.
Next up, we have Michael Bear. Michael, when
everyone. I haven't really thought through what I was going to say. The water purchase agreement is extortion. And I guess my question is, have they signed it? So now they've agreed to sign it. They've agreed to accept an additional $10 million. When do they sign it? When can Monterey One go get the loan because they have a water purchaser? What is the status of that? The ASR is being completely mismanaged in order to get those pipelines. If I recall, I believe I heard in January, Mr. Stolt saying that if they took the water in the winter from the Carmel River when it was flowing and banked the Monterey One water in the winter, then they could use these wells for injection as they were designed. But they're not doing that. So they need to get 2 more wells, which they're going to own and get millions of dollars for. It's the mismanagement. So I think there's a clear case for a public need. And I think, I don't know, like I'm thinking about the test slant well, like that is outside your district. Like what is the legal ramifications of even acquiring the test slant well in Marina? You don't have property over there. How can you acquire that? Should that be part of the offer? I don't think so. But I don't know. I don't know the legal ramifications. So yeah. Somebody said it was happening too fast. It's happening way too slow. 10 years. So let's get on with it. Thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, Mr. Bear.
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands and no one's approaching the lectern.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to close public comment. and move into our consent calendar. I hope as everyone's had the opportunity to review the consent calendar, could I have a motion to approve? Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you very much. So that's Edwards and Riley. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Paul,
Here, yes.
your mic is muted.
Yes.
Got it. Director Eisenhart, absent. Mayor Oglesby. Director Edwards, Director Riley, Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. With that, we will go to our general manager's report.
Well, thank you very much. Because I am remote. And by the way, Tom Rowley is more than welcome to join me while I'm quarantined with COVID to look me in the eyes in person, but I think he'd choose not to. Sorry, I can't be there for our first physical meeting back. I've got one more day to go on quarantine. So as Joelle's pulling up the PowerPoint. There we go. And we'll go ahead to the second page. No. Do you have it, Joelle, or should we just wing it?
I have it.
Okay.
Perhaps we should just go ahead and if you can catch up with us, Joel, that would be terrific. Dave, are you able to go forward without the, here it is, just as we spoke.
Yes, I am, but there it is. Nope. Terrific. So start on the second page. What you will find of interest is, and later in the agenda, you will have a chance to approve the quarterly water budget. You may recall that these compliance charts show actual versus target. The target comes from the quarterly water budget. And what you see from this first chart is that both on the Carmel River and on the Seaside Basin, actual withdrawals or actual production has been significantly below the target. And there's three reasons for this. What we're seeing is that there's more pure water Monterey water being produced. We have the luxury of during the winter when there's no competing uses for recycled water up at Monterey 1 with the growers. We can focus more heavily on production from Pure Water Monterey, the advanced water purification facility. So there's more Pure Water Monterey water being produced and being utilized, and you'll see that on the next chart. You will also see that there's more Table 13 water rights being produced from the river, and there's less irrigation demand. And so what we see is this actual significantly below the target. And then, yes, as you can see on this chart, the Table 13 water rights were estimated to be 0 after 2 years of drought, and it's already over 200 acre feet. And then Pure Water Monterey recovery is 245 acre feet above target. So that's what's going on there. Next slide. From a production standpoint of now 5 months into the season, you can see that we're 154 acre feet ahead of last year in total demand. And I would pretty much write that up to irrigation demand. You remember last winter was very dry. There was irrigation happening in February. Obviously, as a result of the rains, that's not the case this year. Next slide. Our rain situation, you can see we're way ahead of long-term average. I've got some better graphics on this. But one thing of note is if you had a blue bar just for the first 20 days of March, it would exceed the red bar for the long-term averages. We're at 4.15 inches already for the month of March. So we remain quite a bit ahead. Next chart, please. This is the cumulative rain gauge data.
Excuse me, Dave, but could I just say if there's anyone who is not speaking, could you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Now go back one, please. I think you can just use the arrow key on your keyboard. Well, suffice to say that of the rainfall that we've had, this is the chart that you don't see shows that we are well ahead of. Yeah. Okay, you're heading in the wrong direction there, Joel. So
Dave, if you could allow Dave,
Yeah.
Dave, if you could allow me, I just need to minimize the screen and mute the mic so that way we don't hear that person.
Okay.
Dave.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
can
So
begin.
yeah. So what somehow we've gotten about 2 slides ahead, Joel. I don't know if you can go back. Now we're 3 slides ahead. Yeah, go back one more. There we go. So this is rainfall through yesterday, the red line being cumulative and the blue bars being daily totals. So you can see we've had really 4 or 5 significant daily events, the taller blue bars, but cumulatively we're at 31.4 inches, which is about 50% over an entire year of our long-term average. So the rain situation remains solid. The atmospheric river that is projected for this coming week is most likely going to hit Southern California, but we may get some rain out of it. Next slide, please. Placing us this year, which is the orange dotted line, this is through the end of February, places us firmly in the extremely wet, which is the highest category. And as I mentioned, as of yesterday, we're at 31.4, which would be basically right at the break point between extremely wet and wet. So with one more rainfall, we will end up extremely wet for the year. Next slide, please. And this is unimpaired stream flow. You can see, the January rains, which really were January floods, wildly exceeded the long-term average. We will likely see an exceedance for March when that data comes in. And then finally, our last slide on ASR injection. The orange bars are the daily amounts and the blue line is cumulative. We should poke our way through the 800 acre feet of stored injected water, probably tomorrow, if not the next day. So we're doing pretty well. but we've been held back in two different areas. One, you can see in early January that gap, or that kind of that low period. That's when many of the Carmel Valley wells were turned off due to flooding and did not come back online immediately due to water quality issues and electrical issues and so forth. And so we had to scale back the injection schedule. And then most recently, you can see the last couple of weeks have been off really about 1/3 capacity for a week, and then about 2/3 capacity for a week. And that's a result of, during the rains, some notable leaks in the Cal-Am system that are difficult to find when all your ground is completely wet. So there were some concerns over tank levels and obviously fire safety flows. And hopefully we'll be back up to 3,000 gallons per minute soon. But we've been tracking at about 2,000 gallons per minute. So we're doing about 2/3 of what we could be doing, which of course is constrained by pipeline diameter and injection well capacity itself. So we're doing very, very well. We'll probably exceed 1,000 acre feet of injection, but it could have been much, much higher had all the forces aligned in our favor. And that concludes this report. Item 5 is an update on water supply projects. I think we've actually touched on that. The only recent breaking changes are last Wednesday, the Public Advocate's Office of the Public Utilities Commission filed a motion suggesting a potential compromise that would allow the water purchase agreement to be signed. That afternoon, Cal-Am filed a document in support of that compromise. Then the commission met in closed session at its business meeting on Thursday, where we assume they discussed both the proposed compromise as well as the application for rehearing. And we would expect some action as soon as April 6th, which would be their first April business meeting, or 2 weeks later at their second April business meeting, or as Mr. Laredo will tell you, or some point in the future, because we never really know what the PUC is thinking. But we're optimistic. And I think all parties are optimistic that we will see a signed water purchase agreement, which will then allow Monterey One Water to release bid documents to the street. We look forward to the day that happens, and we hope that it happens sooner than later. So that's progress. On the desal front, the written findings and conditions from the California Coastal Commission came out on, I think on Friday, might have been over the weekend. Those have been made available publicly. It's a lengthy read of 179 pages or 139 pages, but nevertheless, that is out there as well for people's consumption. The next item under my report, which is item 6 on the agenda, I've included a staff report on the soft costs or the pre-construction costs that the district agreed to fund under Amendment 6 to the cost sharing agreement for Pure Water Monterey expansion. This is informational so the board could better understand what we signed on for. On the report, there's a specific section as it pertains to legal expenses. And this was directly in response to a question from one of our board members and was discussed at the water supply planning meeting. Primarily, there was concern about the Perkins Coie law firm. I can tell you Best and Krieger deals primarily with the contract execution, construction contracts and so forth. They've done some review of a grant application and NEPA, but it was primarily a question about Perkins Coie and 2 budget increase requests. And I think the short answer there is the Pure Water Monterey Phase 2 process, which resulted in, well, actually, it might have been Phase 1 process. My nomenclature's off, but the proceeding that led to the approval of the water purchase agreement included some testimony about source waters that was completely unexpected and unfounded, probably unwarranted. But there was an attempt made to say, yes, we want supplemental water, that the expansion is not going to perform as expected. And so that required quite a bit of drafting to refute. And as I mentioned, it was relatively unexpected as a direction of the testimony. And then there were delays in the actual delivery of the proposed decision and the commission vote on the decision, including a hastily called all hands meeting up in Sacramento. So the Perkins Coie, which does the CPUC work on behalf of Monterey One Water and on behalf of the project team, was tasked with quite a bit more than what was originally envisioned. And that's why that budget went up. My understanding also, as you look at the chart on the staff note, is that the remaining is now quite a bit down, that there's been some additional invoicing. We've not seen that invoice package. So what happens is Monterey One's contractors invoice them, and then Monterey One invoices us under the cost sharing agreement. And then we go through all of those pages to make sure everything was properly allocated. So we'll be seeing some of those new invoices, I would imagine, in the next Monterey One billing. But it's been an expensive process. I think it's could be considered mostly done and accomplished. There will be a little additional work, hopefully, to just get this thing signed. But that is available in your packet as an information item. I can take any questions, or we can move on to the next item.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Yes.
This one, Chair, Dave, next month, water demand will be having a first meeting. Will we be able to send something to the state, taking us out of this stage 2, that we're in, if we're not in?
Yeah, that is an agenda item for the committee. You know, our 14.1.1 tariff sheet is a combined, it's not our tariff sheet, it's Cal-Am's. It's our program that Cal-Am has adopted. It's not clear that Cal-Am would want to unilaterally take itself out of stage 2. So I think what we will be discussing at the committee, and then potentially sending a letter to the state, is you need to selectively repeal the executive order for places that no longer have a drought. But we'll focus on that at the committee. But something needs to be said, because you know we're sitting in stage 2 with completely full storage, and you know we've got other agencies up and down the state like Humboldt County and so forth that have no inkling of drought conditions, and storage is fairly full. So we'll take that one up.
Thank you.
We'll take that one up.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the board that wish to ask a question? Any members of the public that wish to ask any questions at this point?
I have one brief comment.
Okay, thank you. With that,
I have one brief comment through the chair, if I may. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
yes.
Just a very brief comment. I think we, the board of the district, this board, owes it to our constituents, our ratepayers, to make sure that the money spent on Monterey One Water's legal expenses is also money well spent and reasonable in amount, and that we should review the legal invoices with that in mind. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Okay, Seeing no other comments, are there any hands raised in the, great, okay. Thank you. With that, we will close our general manager's report for the moment and go to our district council.
Good evening, Madam Chair. The board did convene in closed session at 5 p.m. earlier this evening. There are 2 items on the closed session agenda. The first item was a conference with real property negotiators concerning properties held by California American Water Company. As to that item, the board was not able to complete its discussions and did continue that item to a special closed session meeting on a date yet to be set. But there was no reportable action. That discussion has not been concluded.
Thank you very much.
The second item was a conference with legal counsel concerning the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association lawsuit. That matter was not even begun, and the board did continue that discussion to continue after the end of all open session items, and we will reconvene in closed session for that purpose later this evening.
Thank you very much, District Council. Okay, with that, we will move on to our director's reports. If there is anyone who has a report on activities or the AB 1234 reports on trips, conference attendance, and meetings. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Last month, I stood in for Director Raleigh at the Water Master meeting that they had. We so happen to have one of our own. Director Oglesby was elected chair for the next couple of years or less. But I attended that meeting and he was elected chair, and I appreciate that. Also attended City of Seaside council meetings just to update them on water issues. And I listened to the Recycle Water Committee over at Monterey 1 on March, I think it was 16th. They saying the same thing that everyone else is saying about Cal-Am. We hope we're moving forward on that expansion program. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Edwards.
Thank you.
Director Riley, any comment? Thank you. Ms. Anderson, Mr. Oglesby. Thank you. And Director Paul, have you any comments?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we're going to enter into the part of our meeting where we go into a public hearing. And we're going to consider adoption of the 2022 Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Annual Report. Jonathan Lear.
Thank
leading
you.
us off. I
Chair.
sort of miss all the guitars behind you though, that we used to have on Zoom.
Okay,
Good evening, Chair Adams, members of the board.
hang on, are we on the right item, John?
Oh,
I think we've got,
the annual.
This is
Thank
the
you.
annual report.
yep. No, I've got that one. So what you have in front of you, John will be back shortly and this will go quickly. Exhibit 9A is a 6-page PDF, which represents the proposed annual report that the Public Outreach Committee reviewed at its committee meeting and recommended approval by the full board. There will be 6 or 7 nominal, non-substantive edits made, some word choice and some spelling, which is in the hands of our public outreach consultant. But I think it's a very nice look. It's different than prior years. It will be primarily electronic. It'll probably go out with one of our newsletters in later April. And then we will have several physical copies in a trifold format available in our lobby and available for anyone to use as leave behinds for meetings or what have you. So I think it's a very nice adaptation of our old format or our old style of prose to a very good looking kind of visual piece. And so we thank our consultant for pulling it together. But we do need, as a part of this public hearing, for the board to adopt the annual report.
Thank you, General Manager. So with that, I will see if there's any comment from the board members on this item. Yes, Ms. Anderson.
I congratulate you for fixing it up in the way that we requested. It looks really good. I see just one more thing that I might suggest in it's just a formatting issue, but it's very small. So anyway, it looks great, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I support it.
Any other comments from the board? Any member of the public who wishes to comment on the annual report? Don't want to blather on about how fabulous it looks.
Chair Adams,
anyone
Chair
online?
Adams, I see no raised hands, and no
Okay.
one approaching the lectern.
Thank you so much for that. So I think because we have to approve it, we're going to have a vote to ensure that we do. So I checked on public comment and there was no one there. Thank you. Got it. Excellent. Thank you. So we have a motion to approve, and is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And a second. So if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Director Eisenhart, absent. Director Paul,
Yes, and thanks to those who worked on it. Yes, and thanks to those who worked on it.
Mayor Oglesby, Director Riley.
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to item number 10.
Yes, this will be John Lear and.
Hello again.
Yes, this will be John Lear and. I was just going to
There
ask
you go.
Director Anderson to send me her comment via email.
Thanks, John. So this is public hearing, item number 10, which is the consider for adoption, the quarterly water budget for the period of April to June 2023 for the main California water system and the satellite system. So next slide, please. Now, there are a number of water board orders that we must follow, as well as rules, district rules that go into consideration. Those are listed at the first bullet point. We also talked at that meeting about the ASR plan, as Dave mentioned earlier, with the river and at the stage that it's at and the forecast for the rains, there's likely 2 more months of injection, which will bring us to the end of our days allowed for injection, which is the end of May. This has happened a couple years before, the most recent being 2017. So we think this year is looking a lot like that one. So we're focusing on trying to maximize injection, and that's the daily rates. We'd like to hit 13 acre feet a day if possible. There will also be table 13 diversions, which is based on almost the same triggers for ASR, which would be another 2 more months at about 3.25 acre feet of consumption a day. And then for Pure Water Monterey operations, the first month of April, and we'll continue to recover to deliver to the system 355 acre feet. And then we'll continue to inject for May and June, but there will be no recovery as the water that's injected will go into the operational reserve as the contracts and the purchase agreement mentioned as the time frame for that. We can move on to the next slide. Some of the assumptions are to use all of the native groundwater in the Seaside Basin, the allotment that belongs to Cal-Am. And we will continue ASR injection in table 13 through the end of their permit windows. And this budget was developed on March 10th, and the members of the quarterly water budget group are MPWMD, Cal-Am, Fish and Wildlife, and Fish and Wildlife Services, National Marine Fisheries, as well as the State Water Resources Control Board. So next slide. In developing this, we looked at the forecast for the next 3 months, our area does say equal chances of normal. And what that means is if we were to finish, as Dave was stating earlier, if this forecast were to come true and we were to finish with kind of the average bars and receiving the average bars, we would end up in our extremely wet category. So as we've learned in past years, as long as we get a half an inch to an inch every 2 weeks, going through the next 2 months, we'll be able to sustain project operations. So next slide, please. Now we get into the quarterly water budget. The top of this table speaks on the Carmel Valley Aquifer. And so it talks about production out of the different areas of the well fields in the Carmel Valley Aquifer, and then where those waters will go to. So as you can see, in the first month, we will have 100 acre feet produced for delivery to meet demand in the system. And then we'll have 300 acre feet produced to go and inject, as well as we'll have about 95 acre feet produced over this month to go to customer service to meet the table 13 demands. And you can see the first 2 months of the quarterly water budget in the Carmel Valley Aquifer. We have ASR injection, and then of course we're out of the permit window for the month of June. So that drops out of the last month, and then the pumping to meet customer demand increases on the river over the quarterly water budget, because if we move down to the Seaside groundwater basin, the pure water Monterey recovery number on the bottom of that drops out of the last 2 months. So in balancing the supplies, the little bit more water is coming out of the river to meet customer demand. And as well as there's a little bit more water that will be produced, there'll be about the same amount of water produced out of the Seaside groundwater basin, but instead of it being counted as pure water Monterey recovery, it will be counted as native Seaside groundwater recovery. And so then that breaks down to the numbers that we see. And as you can see on the total on the bottom, the first 2 months are much more larger because they're accounting for the water that's going to be produced and injected into ASR. Next slide, please. For the satellite systems over the last couple of years, the only one that does any more pumping out of the Laguna Seca area is the Hidden Hill system. The other 2 systems have interties in them and receive water delivered from sources produced in the main system. We know that there's about 300 acre feet of demand within the Cal-Am service area in that area. And we're moving into this area of April, May, and June. So we would forecast that these percentages of the demand of the Hidden Hill system will be physically produced out of the Laguna Seca system. There is a mechanism at the Seaside Watermaster where over pumpages in the Laguna Seca area, because the allocation has fallen to 0, can be accounted for with shortages of the same size in the coastal system. So that is likely how this overage will be handled at the end of the water year. Next slide, please. So the recommendation of the quarterly water budget group to the board is to adopt this water supply strategy and budget for the main water system for this quarter of the water year that covers 2023 April to June 2023. And then we will, if ratified and adopted, the district staff will move forward and file this appropriate CEQA paperwork. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lear. And let's see if we have any questions or comments from the board. Are there any directors who wish to make a comment or ask a question? Ms. Paul, any?
Not at this moment, thank you.
Hearing nothing?
Not at this moment, thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll go to the public and see if there's any member of the public who wishes to make comment or ask questions on this item number 10. I'm seeing no one coming forward. Is there anyone online?
No raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. And I believe since we are considering approval, that we'll need to have a motion to approve the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Ogle.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we could please have a roll call vote.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Riley.
Aye.
Director Eisenhart, absent. Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Oglesby. Vice Chair Anderson. Chair Adams,
Aye.
the motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. With that, we will close item number 10 and go now to action items. The first one that we have is item number 11, which is to consider authorizing the general manager to enter into a contract with Montgomery and Associates to provide a Tularcitos Aquifer Storage and Recovery feasibility study. And I
Thank
believe we're
you.
going to have
District
a presentation
Engineer
from-
Maureen Hamilton will cover this one.
Joelle, just let me know when you're ready, please. There you go. Good evening. I'm here to request that the board consider authorizing the general manager to enter into a contract with Montgomery and Associates for a Tularcitos Aquifer Storage and Recovery feasibility study. Next slide, please, Joelle. Our water rights evolved from the Carmel River, beginning with water right 2808 in 1995. It was issued for the New Los Padres Dam and had what we call a face value of 24,000 acre feet. In 1995, the public voted that dam down, and the district began pursuing a number of different projects, including the ASR Phase 1 project, which are ASR's wells 1 and 2 at the Santa Margarita site. So in 2007, we requested that 2808 be revoked and that a permit for ASR Phase 1 with the remaining going to the New Los Padres Dam be issued. In 2011, the district was on its way to developing the last 2 ASR wells at ASR Phase 2 or the middle school site. The State Water Board issued permit 2808C for that second ASR permit, and 2808B was reissued with a face value of 18,674 acre feet a year. Next slide, please, Joelle. In early March of 2020, the State Water Resources Control Board sent a letter to the district asking about our plan for 2808B because it would expire in December of that year. Later in March, the Water Board staff met with district staff to get agreed upon plan forward so that our response could be readily agreed to. And the response that was agreed upon is that we would withdraw our petition for an extension of time to construct the New Los Padres Dam, but request an extension of time to show beneficial use. And that once the district had completed a feasibility analysis and identified a viable project, we would petition to modify the water right for the new project. In December of 2020, the district submitted a petition for a 15-year extension for water right 2808B for the New Los Padres Dam, soon to be the project we hope to define out of this feasibility study. Next slide, please, Joelle. So with water rights, you can't just sit on them for as long as you want. You have to, every water right is issued with a time frame in which they want to see really the water right be beneficially used. They've been gracious enough to allow us to show due diligence in achieving beneficial use of the water right. So if we don't show that due diligence and selection of a project and getting that project underway, we're liable to lose our water right 2808B in excess of 18,000 acre feet a year. Joelle, next slide, please. District staff evaluated a number of projects that we've been talking about over the years, and any project, you have to look at your existing infrastructure and your needed infrastructure. Existing infrastructure includes the ability to divert Carmel River water from the river, convey it to a storage location, and then recover it. So our existing ASR water rights, permits 2808A and C, allow us to divert 29.1 acre feet a day. So the most under our existing water rights we can divert in a day is 29.1 until we find another project. The diversion, the wells in the upper Carmel Valley are limited to about 30 acre feet a day, and that's with everything running perfectly. It would be a great day on a 30 acre feet a day. The conveyance to move that diverted water to storage is currently limited to 19 acre feet a day or less. And that would be unless the Monterey pipeline can be used, at which point we would be able to convey more water. Storage is limited to 26 acre feet a day with all 4 existing ASR wells in service. So we knew we needed to find a project that included diversion, conveyance, storage, and recovery. And that project is the Tularcitos ASR project. Next slide, please, Joelle. This map shows the Carmel River, kind of the overall watershed. The blue line that you see running from the left side of the screen down to the bottom is the Carmel River. The purple line on the lower right side is the Tularcitos Creek. Where the Tularcitos Creek meets the blue line, the Carmel River, that's where water would be diverted and conveyed to the green line, which is Chupinas Creek, for injection using hopefully an ASR well. Next slide, please, Joelle. So the next steps are for a consultant to analyze the availability of Carmel River water for additional ASR diversion to the Chupinas Creek watershed, to develop a hydrogeological framework, which for non-hydrogeologists is structural features, evaluate the hydraulic properties of the geology as it's known, and the hydrostratigraphy, which I also had to look up, which is classification of geologic structures in regard to their water-bearing characteristics, basically how much water can we get in and get out. The next step is developing cross sections of the area of interest. Think of a vertical slice of the layers of soil, if you will, underlying where we're interested in drilling, and then running the Carmel River Carmel River Basin hydrologic model to evaluate ASR well feasibility and to size it. The last step would be selecting the most likely viable sites for further geologic exploration. Next slide, please, Joelle. Staff is requesting that the board authorize the general manager to enter into a contract with Montgomery and Associates to provide the Tularcitos ASR feasibility study in an amount not to exceed $119,200. Work will be conducted on a time and materials basis, and the total amount was included in the fiscal year 22-23 budget that was approved by the board in July. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Maureen. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. Is there any parallels or comparable data between the ASR system based on flow volumes, any stratigraphy correlations or whatever? Is there any similarity between what happens at the Carmel River ASR program and what might be expected at the Tularcitos? Is there a volume question? It's really a volume question. I know it's
a volume question on the diversion amount or on the ability for the geology to hold water?
No, I know the diversion amount. Yeah, I understand that there's a diversion on the Salinas River as well, which was in effect for 50 years. The interest in the Carmel and this Salinas did not act on it. They lost 35,000 acre feet of rights because they didn't take any action on their rights, on their water rights. So now we're in the same position about taking some action and not losing it. So my question though is, taking action is one thing, but is there a projection at what the capacity might be? So that have a threshold idea? I mean, 10 acre feet might not be worth it, but if it's up to 25 or so, it might be worth it. Per
That's
day,
the-
I'm just asking the.
Were you asking the general manager or me? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing well. That's what this feasibility,
Whoever has a response.
that's what this feasibility study will vet.
I understand the details will come in the feasibility study, but is there any idea going ahead to justify $119,000 today? That's my,
Yes, and I would
is it
defer
just to
to
cover
John,
your tail to not lose?
I would defer to John Lear on the geological history of that area.
I would not expect the aquifer to be quite as prolific as the Santa Margarita. It would, the injection rates maybe half, meaning you would just need a larger well field. And the economics balance with the amount of infrastructure you need. It's a much shorter distance to transfer water, so you don't have to come through the bottlenecks of the main system that you're experiencing right now. And so if you can get a number of well fields in there, we already know that the type of structure that we have that diverts water for the Sleepy Hollow facility works in that area at a high rate. So it's been building together of things we've seen succeed. And so there is a sandstone out in that area that would receive water, but the step would be to create this model and get to exactly that question. I would expect reduced rates, but I would expect reduced infrastructure costs. So when you reduce both of them, you may be getting to $1 per acre foot value that may be worth something.
I understand the real data is to come, but I'm just curious, what's the justification?
I don't expect it to be as good. The justification is it's a spot that we found that's very close to where we can divert water out of the river that could hold water. And it's really the only geologic unit in that area that could be targeted in that for that use. And so in the Trulucitos area, it actually came back around because I believe it was in the late 80s, there was a push to look at damming of off-channel structures. And that was a valley that was evaluated at that time too. It was being used as ranch land and was not found that would be a use that it could be used for, but a set of wells on easements that still allow for the same land use may be something that could be a source of money for a landowner as well. So that's kind of the whole reasoning we put this together.
I'm glad we're exhausting our, options which seem to exist, and we got to determine the feasibility of, whatever option we have in front of us. But I'm aware of not losing the right. I'm very much aware of that.
Thank you. Are there any other directors with questions? Hearing none, I'll go out to the public and see if there's any member of the public who has any questions on this item. Seeing no one racing forward. Joel, are there any people online with their hands raised?
As a reminder, if you're participating via Zoom tonight, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, you will need to push *9 to signal to me that you would like to make public input. Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Okay, well, Maureen, thank you so much for the presentation, and Jonathan for your additional information as well. With that, I think we will bring it back, and I believe that we need to authorize the general manager to enter into the contract. So we will need to have a motion and a second to move forward with this.
I move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thank
And
you
just
very much.
quickly on the second, staff, I hope that we send something to the state on this issue. I don't want it to sit on our desk and let them think we're not doing anything. The reason why we're approving this, because we want to keep what we got, and we want to let them know that we are working. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lear.
That is our plan there. When you submit your water rights every year, there's an opportunity to update work you've done. So yes.
Let's keep them updated. Good, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. If we could please have a roll call vote.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Director Eisenhart, absent. Director Edwards,
Aye.
Mayor Oglesby, Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting presentation. Okay, and now we will move forward to item number 12, which is to consider the approval of additional contingency funds for the Sleepy Hollow Steelhead Rearing Facility, the Rearing Channel Rehabilitation Project. And I think that we are going to have a presentation by the general manager and the slide deck presentation by Mr. Hanson or Tom Christensen.
Yeah, it will be Larry giving this presentation.
All right, so Joel, if you could start item 12. I do want to just let you know that there is a 3 to 4 second delay between the video and the audio. So if you ask questions and I appear to not answer them right away, it's because there's a bit of a delay. So as the item states, this is to consider approval of additional contingency funds for the Sleepy Hollow Steelhead Rearing Facility, Rearing Channel Rehabilitation Project. And next one. So just to recap the expenditures to date, in the, actually, I guess it's the July 22 to June 30, 23 budget, there was $750,000 budgeted for the project, which included construction and engineering services. In November, the board approved a construction contract and contingencies along with, well, the board didn't approve the engineering services, but the budget included engineering services, which brought the item up to $773,500. Which at the time it was recognized there would need to be a major budget adjustment. So as of early March, all but $1,585 of contingency funds had been expended on change orders. And we anticipate probably not expending $33,000 for engineering services, but we do have a contract for up to $33,000 for the rest of this project. So we're at a point where we have $1,585 left, a little under $1,600 in contingency funds, with about, at this point, about 25% of the project to complete. So we thought it was prudent to add additional contingency in case there are unanticipated conditions at the site in completing this project. And so without additional contingency funds, there is a risk that if something comes up, we would have to stop the project, which could incur a claim from the contractor for delaying the project. And what this request is for an additional $100,000 in contingency funds. So Joel, could we have the next slide? So there were 5 major change orders that I'll describe here in the next few slides. And so we could go to the next one. I'll describe each one individually. If we could go to the next slide. So the most expensive was to extend the French drain, which you can see in the left-hand side. The French drain is actually, it's rocks, basically, with a 4-inch perforated pipe inside the rocks that's wrapped with fiber to stop sediment from coming into the drain. What's the key here is that the lines on the rearing channel walls that you see in both photos, both left and right, those are due to roots. And those roots got into the rearing channel because of all the water leakage, and probably complicate or compromise the liner that was in place, and caused additional water to come out of the rearing channel. And so this is a major concern, trying to intercept the water that can come out of the rearing channel so that and convey it to the end of the rearing channel so that the roots aren't encouraged to grow. And so the right hand picture shows you the perforated pipe that's actually in the bottom of the trench that isn't shown in the left hand picture. So if we could have the next slide. So the next change order was a little less expensive at $16,000, but the photo on the left shows expansion joints that were constructed with the original 1996 and 97 construction. They're about a ½ inch. They were supposed to be filled. They weren't. And so this allowed additional root penetration. And in order to deal with that issue, the contractor dug down a couple of feet underneath this into the soil and sealed up the rearing channel expansion joints. And then the final step was to put a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of rubber mat that's glued to the concrete with concrete adhesive to further discourage moisture from getting into the rearing channel. And the next slide. So we had a little conflict among the different pipes. So the picture on the left-hand side is actually taken looking straight down. The white cap at the bottom of the photo where it says existing 6-inch drain above the French drain, that's sitting about 6 to 8 inches above the French drain. We had hoped we could connect the French drain to that existing drain, and it wasn't possible. So we had a vertical displacement, and in order to route that French drain around and out to daylight, which is shown on the right, it was almost $10,000. So the photo on the right shows you the green drain that is in the left-hand picture coming out into the discharge channel. And then to the right of that white pipe in the right-hand side is the French drain that is draining out into a little pit that we made of cobbles. So far, the French drain has not conveyed any water, which is kind of surprising given how wet everything's been. But I anticipate as the watershed finally starts discharging above the rearing channel, we'll probably see some water in the French drain. So could I have the next slide? So one of the things we found after removing the hypalon liner was that portions of the channel had been lined with felt. And you can see in the left-hand picture, there's a fabric underliner on the tops of the rearing channel walls. Well, given how the hypalon liner didn't fare so well in certain portions of the channel, probably due to people walking like on those concrete weirs that you see in the left-hand photo at the bottom of the rearing channel, we decided that it would be a good idea to put a Mirify fabric underneath the new liner to be placed. And this should extend the life of the liner and deal with some wear issues. And so the picture in the bottom right there is showing you the rearing channel as it is approximately just a few days ago. Nearing completion, there's some pipelines to be put in on the left-hand side of the rearing channel, but the work in the bottom of the rearing channel is now complete. So we're looking forward to getting this project done, hopefully in the next about 2 to 3 weeks. And the next slide. So this is a request. This is a request to authorize the general manager to approve additional $100,000 in contingency funds in case we need it to complete the rehab project. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Larry. Is there any director who has a question? Yes, Mr. Riley.
Does any of this contingency money expected to cover flood damage? I think we've dealt with flood damage in a prior board meeting with some appropriations, but is this involved in any of that repair work as well?
Well, there has been $250,000 authorized to deal with flood damage. I think we probably will not expend those funds completely. So if there is additional damage to the road, I don't anticipate a flood, with this next event. But if there's damage to the road, I think it can be handled under the current authorization for emergencies. But I guess if the damage was enough, then these contingency funds could allow for any work that would be needed to keep the project moving and keep the road open.
Are there any cost overruns that are in current operations or current repair work and rehab work?
No, what we've done is we've changed some. There's no cost overruns in the items. However, we have changed some of the scope of work in order to accomplish some of these change orders. So there wasn't enough in the contingency to do all of the work within the construction project and the change orders. So we amended some of the work that was being done as part of the original contract. But even doing that, we're still down to $1,600 in the contingency funds that were previously approved.
This 100,000 is intended to cover change order excesses or change order.
Any unforeseen items starting with that authorization. So if we have an unforeseen item tomorrow, it would cover those items that would come up.
I'm just, the reason I'm a little cautious here is that I would think that for $100,000, you might have a little better idea about where you think some expenses may be required, undetermined yet, but at least you have some categories of costs that might be needed, and therefore you need a contingency plan.
I didn't
Maybe
expect to
I'm not making
use.
myself clear, but
I didn't expect to use $94,000 in contingencies on this project.
and you're asking for another 100,000 though, right?
I don't want to have to come back and ask for anything. I mean, if you want to reduce it, okay, I'm all right. I'm all right.
Any other questions, Mr. Riley?
No.
Okay, any other directors have any questions on this item?
I just want to make sure that I understand what Mr. Riley just said. Thomas, I think that you had a need of an additional $94,000 because of all the change orders and all the problems you found with routes, et cetera, and you just need the $100,000 to cover.
No, the previous contingency was authorized at $96,500. We've gone through that. We're down to the last $1,600. If there are any other items that come up in the completion of this project, we would have to stop the project and get additional authorization in order to move forward. And so we're trying to avoid that, complete the project in a timely fashion, and not risk having the contractor come back and make claims for delaying a project. So this additional 100,000 is to see us through any unforeseen circumstances and complete this project.
And the $94,914 is just
It's gone.
of what you might. Am I missing?
Uh,
one?
That's gone.
That's gone.
That's gone? Okay,
That's gone. That's
Okay.
made that.
got it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, any questions, Ms. Paul?
No, I would just like to say that Thomas's explanation makes sense to me that, I mean, contingencies are for unforeseen, necessary but unforeseen costs, and I guess there have been more of them than expected. And we need a contingency for unforeseen costs that may yet arise, in the work that remains to be done. So, I mean, it seems like a sensible request to me. We don't want to have to stop work. We don't want to have, claims about payments. So I support the request.
Thank you, Karen. I'm not seeing any more directors with questions. I'm going to take it out to the public, see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item. Seeing no one here, is there anyone online? Okay, let's bring it back then. Thank you so much for your presentation, Larry. Don't know where you are, but the mountains look beautiful. And with that, I would like to entertain a motion to authorize the additional $100,000 in contingency funds for the Sleepy Hollow.
I move that we make that a motion, and just quickly on the second, if I get a second. Okay,
I'll
we
second.
heard this at administration. Whoever wanted, I'm pleased with it. But we listened to this at administrative committee. One of my problems was $100,000. But they said we got it in the budget and we can do it. So that's the only reason I'm agreeing to this. And I don't think, and I hope that Larry don't go out there and spend that whole 100,000. I'm looking for something to come back. I'm tired of putting contingencies out there and we burn them up. We use them. We'll find something to spend them on. Let's bring some money back to the district if we can on this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And could we have a motion and a second?
Can I have a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, my reluctance, I'm going to vote in favor of it. My reluctance, Larry, is that it seems to me the contingency fund ought to have some categories of expected overruns or complications or something to suggest that you need some flexibility. And I can understand a 20,000, 40,000, 50,000 contingency at some level. Just 100 seems a little excessive to me. And but I'm going to trust everybody on this, and I'm not going to oppose it. But I just think in the future there needs to be a little better explanation for a 6-digit contingency addition on a project.
Thank you. Yes.
I can't hear Mayor Oglesby.
It's only about 30+% left of the project. And he should be able to tell us.
That's gone.
That's gone.
That's gone? Okay,
That's gone. That's
Okay.
made that.
got it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, any questions, Ms. Paul?
No, I would just like to say that Thomas's explanation makes sense to me that, I mean, contingencies are for unforeseen, necessary but unforeseen costs, and I guess there have been more of them than expected. And we need a contingency for unforeseen costs that may yet arise in the work that remains to be done. So, I mean, it seems like a sensible request to me. We don't want to have to stop work. We don't want to have, claims about payments. So I support the request.
Thank you, Karen. I'm not seeing any more directors with questions. I'm going to take it out to the public, see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item. Seeing no one here, is there anyone online? Okay, let's bring it back then. Thank you so much for your presentation, Larry. Don't know where you are, but the mountains look beautiful. And with that, I would like to entertain a motion to authorize the additional $100,000 in contingency funds for the Sleepy Hollow.
I move that we make that a motion, and just quickly on the second, if I get a second. Okay,
I'll
we
second.
heard this at administration. Whoever wanted, I'm pleased with it. But we listened to this at administrative committee. One of my problems was $100,000. But they said we got it in the budget and we can do it. So that's the only reason I'm agreeing to this. And I don't think, and I hope that Larry don't go out there and spend that whole 100,000. I'm looking for something to come back. You know, I'm tired of putting contingencies out there and we burn them up. We use them. We'll find something to spend them on. Let's bring some money back to the district if we can on this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And could we have a motion and a second?
Can I have a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, my reluctance, I'm going to vote in favor of it. My reluctance, Larry, is that it seems to me the contingency fund ought to have some categories of expected overruns or complications or something to suggest that you need some flexibility. And I can understand a 20,000, 40,000, 50,000 contingency at some level. Just 100 seems a little excessive to me. And but I'm going to trust everybody on this, and I'm not going to oppose it, but I just think in the future, there needs to be a little better explanation for a 6-digit contingency addition on
That's
a
right.
project.
Thank you. Yes.
I can't hear Mayor Oglesby.
It's only about 30+% left of the project. And he should be able to tell us what could use $100,000, right? I would think the majority of it is done already, you know, and I understand the unexpectancy of it, that's no problem. But to ask for 100,000 when it's only 30% of the project left, then you should know what's the possibilities of things that may go wrong. So, right, that's why I want some money back. Well, through the chair, they are going to spend what they need.
Thank you for your comments, and I appreciate the presentation. And we have a motion and a second. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Director Eisenhart, absent. Mayor Oglesby, Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams,
Aye.
the motion carries.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to close that item and move on now to the consider approval of the district's legislative advocacy plan. And I believe this is going to be a presentation by our district.
Yes, this will be a verbal. You have in front of you Exhibit 13A, which is the proposed legislative plan for the current calendar year, 2023. It is a little different than previous years. The first 4 pages represent a new approach based on a template that the California, the CDSA, so CSDA, California Special Districts Association used, modified a little bit towards our usage, but the first 4 pages represent a little bit better description of policy and priorities and procedures related to ledge advocacy. And the remaining 3 pages, which are a little more normal for our ledge plan, represent the priorities for the current year. This was reviewed by the Legislative Advocacy Committee and recommended for approval. I do want to highlight a couple of things beginning on page 5, our federal strategy. Our federal strategy for the year really revolves primarily around the 20 million Water Resource Development Act authorization that we successfully achieved through Congressman Panetta's office that was signed into law in December. So we're focused primarily on a whole laundry list of projects. The very first ones that we're attempting to get earmarked against that WRDA money are stormwater capture projects. The other area, of course, are making sure that our federal grants or our partners' federal grants at Pure Water Monterey come through, and the WIFIA loan. For the state delegation, you know, we have a new assembly person, Don Addis. We continue to work with Senator John Laird. And then even though not directly covering our district, but certainly affecting work we do primarily with Pure Water Monterey, but also in water in general, we focus on Ana Caballeros and Robert Rivas, his brother. And Robert will be the incoming Assembly Speaker July 1 of this year. And our priorities there are maintaining access to our state grant monies. We have an Urban Community Drought Relief Act, a relief grant, just under 12 million. And then we have a governor's budget earmark, 4.8 million. And then Monterey One has a $15 million grant. Again, those are for Pure Water Monterey expansion. So those are our primary focuses for the year. We did have a tour of Pure Water Monterey and a briefing prepared for Assemblymember Addis. But a week ago today, she joined the COVID club, was diagnosed positive, and so canceled our meeting for last Thursday, which we'll be rescheduling. But we look forward to finally a good in-person meeting. I've certainly been on the phone with her in the past. But that's it. This is the 7-page document. As I said, better defines policy and procedure for things like supporting legislation, supporting it with amendments, non-support, and so forth. So I think it reads pretty well. I think it's a good roadmap. And as I mentioned before, the committee does recommend approval by the full board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager. Are there any questions on this item?
Through the chair, if I may just add something to what Dave just told us about this report. At the Ledge Committee meeting, the members suggested to Dave and to our consultants that if in these meetings with members, our legislative representatives, at times, if it would be helpful to have a board member participate to let us know when they think it could be.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Having been in the Ledge Committee with you, I'll support exactly what you're saying, that we all felt that it can be effective to have a volunteer board member accompany the paid advocates to talk about the things that we want to see accomplished. So thank you for your comment. Is there any other member of the board that wishes to make a comment at this point? Seeing none, any member of the public? Seeing no one coming forward, are there any hands raised?
We have one hand raised. And Susan?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm really glad to see that stormwater capture is being emphasized in the strategy for the feds. And I think it's really, really important that you're doing this with the legislative presence, because I think it's very important for the district to be known at those levels and in that process, and to make them understand what's happening here locally so that decisions that are made aren't going to hurt the district, and they'll be in the favor of the district and the ratepayers here. That's all I wanted to say, but thank you. I'm very glad to see that this has come this far and has been developed even further, and happy to see these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giovanni. Any other members with their hands raised, or rather members of the
No
public?
hand raised.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll bring it back to this board for a motion to approve the legislative advocacy plan. Thank you, Mr. Oglesby. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Riley. Okay, could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Oglesby, Director Riley, Director Edwards, Director Eisenhart, absent, Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. With that, we will close item number 13 and go to item 14. I don't know if we're going to have any introductory remarks from our general manager, but we have,
You mind?
excuse me, Suresh Prasad with us.
We'll see if Dave wants to make an introductory comment.
No, I will have comment when we get to the slide related to the Mechanics Bank loan.
All right, Joel, would you please pull up my slides? Good evening, Chair, members of the board. This is an annual process where what we do is go through the district's financial position for the first 7 months. In our case, it's July through January. We evaluate the financial position and see if any adjustments are needed to be made to the budget. And so we've done the evaluation of the income and expenditure patterns for the first 7 months, and we've determined there are some adjustments that needs to be made. Detailed report is included as part of the staff note. I will go through a brief slideshow, which will highlight some of the changes that we are considering for this fiscal year. And by the way, some of the items that were approved tonight are included in the mid-year budget. Next slide, please, Joel. So briefly, this just shows what the original budget was for fiscal year 22-23. We did our revenue summary at $42 million. And so it just shows how the revenue pies are sliced out between the different types of revenues categories. Next slide, please. Same thing with the expenditure summary. We're showing how we basically balance the budget. There was some use of reserves to balance the budget, but that reserve was basically for the carryover projects. So what carryover projects are is basically if we don't conclude a project which has been budgeted, for example, in fiscal year 21-22, but the project has not been closed out, meaning the project is carried forward, those monies are carried forward because they've already been committed in last fiscal year. And so what we do is just roll over the carryover money. So that's a way I say use of reserves, because what we do is we close the year, we put the unspent funds into the fund balance, general reserve fund, and then for the next fiscal year, we just draw it out. Next slide, please. This shows in comparison what we budgeted for the revenues and what we actually collected for the first 7 months. It's about 50% for the first 7 months, just in line about every year that we go through this review process. And on the expenses side, we had about 42%, which is $13.8 million compared to $32 million budget. And again, when you look in line with other fiscal years, this is a similar pattern what we see for the first 7 months. Next slide, please. Some major assumptions for this year's budget. I'm showing that we are going to be doing continued collections of the following revenues, which is the user fee, as what we had budgeted, property tax, and the big one, of course, is the water supply charge. Due to the litigation, we don't show that there's going to be any impact to this fiscal year. For next fiscal year, we will be talking about that when we develop the budget for 23-24, but at least for 22-23, we are not showing any impact to the water supply charge. And one of the reasons is because we send the file out to the county in June, July, they bill the property tax ratepayers in August of the fiscal year. And so basically that from our side of it, that's done. We've already billed. It's just a matter of collecting the receipt. So that's why we're showing no impact. These, next slide, please. The second big assumption is repayment of Mechanics Bank loan. We have a balloon payment that's due on June 30th, 2023. The amount is going to be principal and interest estimated at $2.15 million. And what we are showing, and I'll show how we've balanced it, what we are showing is that we can pay off the entire Rabobank or Mechanics Bank loan with funds that's already been budgeted in the current fiscal year. So we won't have to take any money from the general reserve or anything. We are able to sustain and maintain from whatever was budgeted in the original budget. And we've shifted some projects where the projects did not materialize, we won't need it. And one of the reasons why we would like to pay it off is because we do have a term sheet from Mechanics Bank in terms of refinancing it. I know we were talking about refinancing the Mechanics Bank loan, but the interest rate market is not favorable these days. As an example, on our current existing loan, we are getting 3.6% interest rate. If we were to go refinance it, we would be looking at about 6.5% interest rate, significantly higher. It's going to be, again, a 25-year amortization with a 10-year term. So we find that paying that loan off is probably going to be better off. And also one of the other biggest hurdle is going to be that because water supply charge is tied up in litigation now, we feel that we are not going to be able to secure that loan with water supply charge. We'll have to secure the loan with district's other source of funds, like the user fee and all that. So the prudent thing to do would be to go ahead and pay it off, since we already are able to do it within the existing budget. And Dave may want to add some existing budget. And Dave may want to add some.
Yeah, that very, very good discussion on that item. The two things I want to add are, as Suresh pointed out, our existing loan is 3.6%. And as an example of our investment portfolio, in November, we bought just a 1-year negotiable certificate of deposit, and its yield was 4.85%. So better to leave a loan outstanding at 3.6, not pay it off, and invest money at 4.85. The new loan would be at 6.5%, and most of our investment opportunities would be less than that. So the kind of the flip has happened in terms of being able to use our money for the highest and best purpose, a little bit of arbitrage, if you will. And the second, Suresh alluded to this, our current loan is secured by an installment purchase agreement. And because it specifically highlighted the water supply charge as the source of security, with that now being subject to question, we'll have to write a new installment purchase agreement against the entire revenues of the district. That legal expense, last time it was Fulbright Jaworski law firm in LA. I don't know who Mechanics Bank tends to use, but that's a $40,000 proposition. So the upfront costs of rewriting this loan are a little more expensive than makes sense. So I think for those two reasons alone, added with the fact that through budgetary savings at the mid-year budget, we can afford to pay it off without increasing debt. In fact, even after the payoff, you will see that a higher deposit to our reserves can be made, a positive deposit. Now is a very good time to do this, and that's what we would ask the board to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Want to continue with the presentation?
Yes, please. So the other portion of it is reduction in project expenses, and that's highlighted in Exhibit 14E. We'll go over that briefly with the presentation. So next slide, please. There were no adjustments needed on the personal cost side of the budget. Next slide, please. Exhibit 14C, which is the supplies and services, minor changes. There was about a little bit of increase in rent for our storage facilities, and also increase in insurance. We had budgeted for insurance, but when the actual insurance bill came out in July, and this was before we had put the budget together. It came out a little bit higher than what we had anticipated. So there's about a $14,000 change to the insurance side of the program. Next slide, please. Exhibit 14D, fixed assets. There are going to be no adjustments. And then next slide. Exhibit 14E, this is where bulk of the changes are. And as you'll see, the total line here is reduction in project expenditures by $5.1 million. So there are some project lines here, CalAm, DCell, water allocation project, $105,000. We are not going to be using it for this fiscal year. Sleepy Hollow design, construct tanks. And part of that, what was approved tonight, the 100,000 is also part of that. So there's an increase in that budget line by 89,500. ASR facility, there's not going to be done for this fiscal year. And so there's a reduction of 354,000. The IRWM project, it's a grant project, so it's a wash on the revenue and expenses side. So I'm showing a $3.1 million reduction on the expense side, but on the revenue side, you'll also see a $3.1 million reduction on that. So it's simply a wash on the revenue and expense side, but that is being moved to next fiscal year. There's some other minor water resource department projects, reduction of 106,000. Then comes the near-term production capacity. This is the big one. We had anticipated doing this project when we originally did the budget, $1.75 million. We are no longer going to be needing this project. So this project is scraped altogether. So meaning this is where the bulk of the savings is, the 1.75, and we need about $1.4 million to pay off the Rabobank loan. And I'll show how that $1.5 million is needed for the $2.1 million loan payoff. But this is where most of the money is coming from. So that's why when I said we don't need any additional new funds to pay the loan off, this is what I mean is that what we had budgeted, what we had anticipated, now with the savings by not doing the project, we are able to turn around and pay the Mechanics Bank loan.
Let me clarify.
Riparian erosion projects increase.
Suresh, let me clarify what that project is or was. You may recall that due to travel times in the Pure Water Monterey project, we took ASR well number 1 out of service as a production well. And we contemplated assisting with a replacement production well if we could fast track it. We also talked about perhaps finding a solution for the failing City of Seaside municipal well number 4, and perhaps using that for a near-term production capacity and then allowing it to then transfer to Seaside. None of those ideas came to fruition. They're not going to be deferred for a year. Simply it's an idea whose time has moved on. And so that's real savings, not a deferral, which leaves a pretty good gap in the mid-year budget. Thanks.
Back to my slides, Joel. Riparian erosion program increase of $37,000. Fisheries program increase of $215,000. And some of these increases are due to the flood drought, the flood work that was approved by this board, the $250,000 approved in February, I think, or January. Conservation programs reduction of 19,000. So that's how we get to $5.1 million in reduction on project line. And next slide will show the reconciliation of how that $5.1 million is tied to the original budget. So original budget was $32.695 million. I showed the supplies and services going up by 16,000, project expenses going down by $5.1 million. Loan payoff, even though the loan payoff is $2.15 million, but the $700,000 is already budgeted, included in the original budget. The debt service of $230,000, plus we were anticipating setting aside $500,000 towards the principal payment. So that's that $730,000 that's already in that $32 million. And so now all I need to do is just move another $1.4 million towards the debt payoff. And so that makes it that $2.15 million. We also setting aside the $250,000 that the board approved using from the flood drought, but because we are able to set aside money for that, we're doing a wash. So showing that we are taking that money out from the flood drought reserve but then now I'm putting it back from the mid-year budget process because we have the surplus money that we are able to put into the flood drought back. And then after doing all of that, we're still going to be setting aside about $387,000 towards the general reserve. So that brings the total amended budget to $29.5 million. And that's with all of the changes that I have described. Next slide, please. Looking at the revenue side, again, we had $32.6 million anticipated revenues. Reimbursement, there was some CalAm reimbursement due to the ASR project that's going to go down by 164,000. And then the grant line, I had showed the $3.2 million on the grant line. So that's the revenue that's completely coming off. And then we were going to use $250,000 from the flood drought because that's what the board had authorized to say, use the $250,000 towards the flood damages. So that's what the anticipated revenue adjustment is of 250. So that brings the amended budget to 27.297, which basically, in essence, is a balanced budget. Going to next slide. Shows a recap of the reserves. Basically, what I'm showing here is what the mid-year budget for fiscal year 21-22 had projected. That's the left column. Then what the actual financial statements for the district was, and that's the actual balance. So some of those categories did not change, but there's the major change was the general operating reserve, and that, we had anticipated about 15.1, we ended up with 18.1. And again, because we don't complete projects, money is already spoken for, it's already committed, but we have not spent the money. So that money goes back into the general reserve. And so that's why you see a little fluctuation in that line. And then I'm showing the budget changes for 22-23, and basically capital equipment reserve, the debt reserve. Actually, it's the budget changes. And then we're setting aside again 100,000 towards the pension reserve. We're setting aside 100,000 towards the OPEB reserve. I'm showing the Mechanics Bank reserve line of a $500,000 coming out because that's going to be used to pay that towards the $2.1 million. And then the general operating reserve uses about 673,000. So all in all, estimated balance as of June 30th, 23. This is what it's estimated to be, about $20.6 million. And again, this is just an estimate. By the time we conclude the year, if projects have not been done, it's just going to get dumped into the general operating reserve and it'll bump the number higher. Next slide, please. I always like to show this chart just so that people looking at the $20 million reserve just don't think that we've got too much money sitting aside. We basically want to share our future obligations and commitments. And so you can see some of the commitments or obligations the district has are listed on this page, which adds to about $14.6 million. This number keeps changing, mostly because the pension OPEB number keeps changing every year. Rabobank will go away after the end of this fiscal year. We would be making the payment, and so that obligation will basically go away from this page. But that's all I have. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Suresh. Go to my pal over there. Just a question.
I missed your comment. I can't remember the IRWMP project. You've got it as a negative 3 million plus,
Yeah, that's a grant funded project.
and it didn't happen this year.
It
That's
didn't
why
happen
it's
this
carried
year.
over?
It'll happen next
Okay,
year.
that's what I thought, but I didn't remember your comment. Okay.
Are there any other questions from board members? Karen, any questions?
No, I think, no questions, just, it's sounds like a very good mid-year budget results that you came up with, the plan to pay off the Rabobank loan, that it's really terrific that you figured out that we're able to do it and maintain a good level of reserves at the same time. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
No,
Go ahead, Joe.
just more comments. I'm just glad to see the detail on the reserve account too. I don't know if maybe I missed it in prior budgets and so on, but I'm liking the way you present
We've always had that.
why it's there.
Yeah, we've always had that. We'll be having some more conversation on the, with the development of the 23-24 in terms of the flood drought reserve fund and a couple of the reserve fund. We've discovered something that with this recent flood event that we'll have to basically address that at next budget.
And is there any cautionary consideration with the current banking?
I believe there was an email that was sent out to Dave and he was going to forward it to the board of directors. Basically, LAIF came out with a statement about how secured their funding is. We have our CDs that we only do up to the FDIC insured amount, 250,000. So there's no risk there. In essence, if the banks do fail, we'll be covered for that. The only risk we have is our checking or money market account with Bank of America, but they are supposed to, the banks, for a public agency to do banking with public agency entities, the banks are supposed to have 110% of the collateral amount. And so in that regard, we should be covered there as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, when can we go over Measure J budget? I want to make sure the public know that we got enough money for that too. So when can we?
Yeah, well, so item 14B that we added is going to be an additional increment to the budget. We can go over the budget. It is part of informational items, item 16. So that information is there. We don't always report
Okay,
on it.
well, all right, I just want the public to know
Yeah.
that we're solvent and we can take care of it. All right.
Yeah,
thank you.
the financial health of the district is strong, even with the taxpayer ruling. You know, we will address what to do about that ruling, I believe, in closed session. But it's not, it will have no devastating impact on the district's financial health.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one quick question, and I just wanted to know regarding the near-term production capacity project that we have taken off the table. Can you tell me if that's going to have any impact at all on just not doing that program?
Yes, so it shouldn't have any impact. The city of Seaside presented, I believe it was 5 options for replacement of their municipal well number 4 during a forum December 28th. I believe that they will move forward with that. There's going to absolutely be some discussion with Marina Coast Water District because their sphere of influence has been growing and changing, and they have their own ordinances about drilling of wells. But anyway, that piece is getting done. And then if in fact Pure Water Monterey expansion moves forward, keep in mind that there's 4 extraction wells or production wells as part of that. So we would be hopeful, even though 2 of those extraction wells probably should have been peeled off and put into a rate case or a separate application years ago, because they're needed just for general purposes, not for the expansion. Nevertheless, that's where the new production capacity will come from, which will greatly help freeing up ASR well number 3 and 4 for injection in the future. So I think we're looking pretty good, but yeah, there's no reason for a separate project at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for that. No other questions from the board. Then I will go out to the public, and I see Mr. Rowley is approaching.
Yeah, good evening again. Tom Raleigh, Vice President, Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. Beg to differ with you on your figures. Maybe you haven't been informed of the results of the court case, which says to cease collecting the water supply charge. I do not believe you've collected it for this 6 months of this year. And in fact, tax bills aren't due until April. And then you usually get your payment sometime May, June. So I would believe that this whole statement on your revenue summary needs to be corrected to eliminate the amount of money you are going to get from the water supply charge for this 6 months of the year. And I'm disappointed to see Her decision was mandated as of March 3rd. This is the 20th. You've had time to update it. I'm surprised it's not. And if I was a board member, I would be very objectionable that this was not an update decision. I'm surprised at Prasad. His figures are usually right on the money to the penny. And this is one time when I don't think he's done you service by giving you good figures for you to deal with. So we're going to be looking to see, we've already requested from the tax collector, well, how you are going to, what you're intending to do with the tax collector, and some kind of notification needs to be made to the tax collector from you as an agency. So this is what we're looking forward to, following what Judge Carrie Panetta has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this?
Yes, I see one raised hand.
All right.
Hi, should I go? Hello, I just wanted to ask a question. I think it's wonderful you're paying off the loan because the Taxpayers Association has been asking for that. I'm surprised that Mr. Raleigh didn't at least compliment you on that because it does look like it's the best thing to do. However, I'm just wondering, because this case has just been decided, I believe the parties may have an opportunity to appeal. So I'm not sure if what he is saying is correct. And I'm wondering if we can get any clarification on that in terms of legal question. Thank you.
Yeah, let me
Thank you very
respond.
much, Ms. Gill.
Let me respond if I may to both of those.
Public comment before we
Yes.
So, yes, excuse me just a moment, Dave. I think, thank you very much. We had no other hands raised and no one online. So we are going to close public comment. And now we will take the comment from our council on the.
Mr. Raleigh is mistaken. This district has no present power to affect the tax roll that was set last year for fiscal year 22-23. The request was transmitted to Monterey County. Monterey County set the tax roll and is collecting that. This district has no role, no discretion, no power to amend that. The next time this district will have a role is setting or making a request that would affect the tax roll for fiscal year 23-24. So there is no action pending, nor is any action that would be appropriate for this district to take at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and looking at Mayor Oglesby.
Thank you. Through the chair to the district council, then what is the county going to do? What is the tax roll? What is the people that collect the taxes? What do you think their responsibility is as it relates to this ruling?
The county's discretion as a public entity was setting the tax roll, which occurred in August. It is now a ministerial act of the assessor's office to collect and to remit those funds based upon the direction that the county board of supervisors gave. So there, once again, there's no discretion for the 22-23 fiscal year. All the discretion will be for the next fiscal year.
Well, yeah, it's just and the county assessor's office, everybody understands that the ruling came in and they will take appropriate action as you understand.
When that ruling is final, then it will have to be abided by, but it is prospective. There was no request for refund, and that can only affect future discretionary actions.
Yeah, I think the chair, we just need to, be clear about our end and what we're doing. So any comments or any any comments that go to whether this board has anything to do with collecting that tax or, giving it back out should be made at other places. That's what I'm trying to get to. We're taking appropriate action here and that's all we can do.
Very good. Okay, so at this point, we have closed public comment, and we will need to come back, and I believe that we're going to have a motion on this to accept the
It's the adoption.
yes, thank you very much. So we'll accept adoption of the proposed mid-year budget adjustments.
I'll second it.
You have a motion and a second. We have a roll call vote, please.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Eisenhardt, Director Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Oglesby, Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards. Did I call on you already?
Yes,
Okay,
I'll say aye again.
okay. Chair Adams,
Aye.
the motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that terrific presentation. Thank you for the additional explanation. You've done so before, but I think all of us need to hear it a couple of times. Okay, so with that, we will just go to the informational items in the staff.
We
report.
have the added item 14B.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did that come through?
That is you?
Yeah, so we added an
14B.
item. Yeah, we added an item 14B, which is consider approval of additional funding not to exceed $60,000 to Raftellus Financial Consulting for a rate study in support of potential future action by the board on public necessity. The reason for this, and the reason it wasn't on the agenda, is when we looked at the work performed by the consultant to date and the timeline through which this board could decide to continue to move forward with a hearing on public necessity, it was brought to our attention that it might be in our interest and in our findings interest to update the rate study that was done in a similar fashion to 2019 to demonstrate savings as a result of acquisition. Raftellus has looked at the schedule, and if they get started basically now in the next week or so, they can finish by the end of May. So that's why the sudden ask. They have provided a scope and a budget.
Any questions for Mr. Stolt? From any of the directors? On item 14B. Is there any questions from or comments from the public on item 14B?
Good evening, Evan Jacobs, California American Water. And wanted to raise the potential Brown Act violation here. I think that as you all have conducted the public's business tonight, we've seen you agendize items for a new contract. We've seen you authorize additional funding for the Steelhead Rearing Facility in Sleepy Hollow. And you're coming now on an agenda item with no written supporting documentation, not properly agendized, no reason given other than to move forward with the resolution of necessity. So I'm not an expert on the Brown Act. I don't pretend to be, but to me, this looks like something that you may want to check with your counsel on and see if you should really proceed tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, he teaches Brown Act.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on this item?
So I return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. So we have had our public comment. I don't know if you would like to make any comments on the Brown Act.
I'd
item?
be happy to. The board did consider whether it should add this item to the agenda. It properly did so with good reason. There is no requirement to have a written agenda report on any matter. If there isn't a written agenda report, it needs to be distributed. But there is no written agenda report on this. This matter is properly before you.
And I believe that our board took a motion
Yes.
and passed the motion to go ahead and add item 14B. So we are not in violation of the Brown Act, to my knowledge. But we will have to, we've gone out to the public now and we've taken our board questions. So we need to have a motion and a second to.
I move approval of this item.
Thank you. We have a motion second. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Riley.
Aye.
Director Eisenhart. Director
Absent.
Paul,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Oglesby, Chair Adams,
Aye.
motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for reminding me of item 14B. I'm sorry that I had forgotten that. We have the informational items that are before you, and I believe that we can just move through those. And now we will go to our final item, which is to adjourn the meeting.
Madam
Yes.
Chair.
Oh, sorry, I'm not
Closed
going to
session
adjourn the meeting.
Reconvene in closed session.
This meeting back into closed session. And we will be able to close out the meeting from closed session. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so with that, I thank you very much for your attendance, and we will be closing this portion of the meeting to the public as we move back into closed session.